Welcome back. This is part two of the juror's mindset of what we think about as we look at artworks in order to make a selection to put together a show. I needed to add a little more before I show you the alternative category for this particular show, because the way a juror's mind works is not just about the individual pieces that have been brought to the table by the entrants. It's also about the shape of the show. Sometimes an art show will have a theme, and so the jurors are then pushed a little bit and directed into making a show that has an overall theme that holds together for the people who come to enjoy the show at a later time. And also a theme helps to guide the idea of what someone might want to purchase if they're coming to a show that's online or in a gallery that conveys a message. So a juror has to be aware of the mindset of the organization that's putting on the show. Fortunately for me, this particular show had no particular overriding theme for it. And so in making my selections, I was guided again by my principles of design. The elements and principles of good design will constantly be part of my selection process. That includes the use of materials, and it also includes a story or a connection to the viewer that the artist was conveying in creating the art. Now, in this category, I should add that in shaping a show, there's also the aspect of the overall presentation. Once I juried the show for the American Academy of Equine Art back in the day, and we had many, many entries, and the six of us were sitting around watching the slides go by in the day of slides versus digital. And we would see umpteen head portraits of horses, because that's a very common subject for artists to depict. And we looked at each other and we said, you know, we can't have a show full of these excellent head portraits. We have to figure out a percentage. So we put our noggins together and came up with the idea that a show should have perhaps 6 good head portraits. Well, that meant that great portraits didn't make it into the show for 2 reasons. Number one, the lineup of slides. If your slide is late in the presentation, your chances of getting into the show are less, because we've already made selections. How do we start dropping them out? And then in the second idea is if you're going to paint a very, very common representational subject for a show, know that you're up against some stiff competition if there's 15 to 30 more of the exact type of subject that's also been entered. This doesn't apply to plein air, because that's landscapes, but you'll notice that plein air has shifted in the last years to convey also interior scenes and street scenes, which were not the original plein air subject matter. And that's good, because the newness of those topics will catch a juror's eye. And that's the goal, isn't it, when you enter a juried show? So without further ado, let's start sharing the screen and get you over to the alternative category. And here we have the first entry that made the cut. Again, design did it. The layout of this piece is extraordinarily well positioned, where the intense contrast is behind the focal point, and all of the design elements of the structure of the landscape bring us to that. I mean, it couldn't have been painted any better. It was so beautifully rendered. Our next selection that made the cut is, again, a beautiful design. We have this lovely clear sky, the reinforcing structure of the clouds bringing us to the obvious focal point right here. And the branches, of course, add dimension and depth to a photograph that might not have had a place for us to stand to watch this vista. And it helps to have a place for the viewer to stand when you're depicting landscapes. Photography is a tough one. I love this painting because of its sepia tones and the fact that it's well designed as well. And of course, being a dog rescuer and a dog owner, I tend to find the eyes of a fur face quite captivating. So you got me. That doesn't mean I need to have 15 of them in the show. Fortunately, in this show, there were not all that many dog portraits. Particularly engaging is this one. Here's another landscape. Notice the framing. See, you're starting to pick up on this now. You see the design of a piece, this sweeping branch, literally repeating the shape of the mountain, which brings your view to these lovely structures. Again, photography is no fun for me because I'm not a master at it by any venture, but I can see good design in virtually anything, which I think is why they asked me to be a juror. I can figure out what works. Now, handling of media the ones that I'm familiar with, I can immediately recognize whether they're adroit or not, and eliminate them if they're not, and keep them in if they are. Now, this person is obviously both adroit and very creative with their photography, whoever that person is. This one caught me for the same reason. Design says we don't like to see equals. And in this case, we have 3 blossoms on the same plant, not any one of which is a copycat of the others. We have 3 different shades, 3 different angles, and the 3 being the odd number. It's always pleasant to see odd numbers in things, unless they're incredibly variant in their size or placement on the canvas or in the image. Now, if you hear noise, it's because my dog's at my feet and she's thinking I should pay attention to her. Now, this is a beautiful collage that came to my attention, again, because division of space, I've got design element, I won't say again, it's just the use of color, division of space, and the placement of the objects makes this for a very interesting composition. The next one holds me for the same reason. And that's because, again, division of space, nothing is repeated without having a nice variation to it. And of course, the textural marks and the unusual face placement, tilted, caught my eye. There are many details in this piece also that makes my mind want to stay in this piece for a while longer. I know this is digitally created, and the story got me. I mean, it absolutely got me. I think there were others being represented by this artist, and but this one caught me for the story. Now, I'm of an age, so seeing how an artist will depict what is inevitable for all of us who manage to get up into our golden years is poignant and forceful. The fact that it's not a strict 1 point, but rather a delightful 2-point perspective with the checkers on the floor reinforcing that just made it even more delightful. Now, there were several pieces that I've learned. I had to go back to the organizer of the show to find out about the construction of this particular piece. It is a gourd. It is not glass, as I first thought, but the gorgeous depiction of how this artist divided the space and the muted colors, the angled lines that are conveyed on it, and the fact that it is a vessel that has a dual purpose immediately caught my eye. The other gourds in the show were just lovely, but this one was stellar and seemed to be a head above the others and made the cut. I picked this one because of its unique design, its absolute cultural messaging, and the fact that everything about it reflects that cultural messaging. We can always paint people in their cultural attire, or create people digitally or however, and yet when we see paint, the imagery that conveys both the color and the feel and the sauciness of this woman in her native dress, it's just delightful, and it caught my eye. The angle, everything, just the diagonals that are in the yellows, everything here just well done. Photography, again, is tough, and subject matter in photography can be more than tough. Now, here we've got a door, a gate, a fence, and something beyond that the viewer wants to go into. Yet the door is so captivating in its blues that reflect almost the exact same shade as the distant mountains, and the color variations that unify this piece, this flash of green at the bottom that I only noticed just now. All of this holds us together, foreground, middle ground, background, and we have the dimension of the photography that just brings us in, holds us, and we want to stay with this piece for a while. So that's why it made the cut. Now, photography of birds is tough. There are a bazillion photographs of birds because they're all around us and they're sort of easy to photograph. But what kept this one in the running for its subject matter is how the photographer handled depth of field. When you have a very narrow range of focus, that's called depth of field. Anything here is out of focus, everything back here is out of focus. So having a nice defined focal point and the triad of mother children creates a powerful image. Single hummingbirds are lovely, but I have to say, when we have the maternity here and the depth of field, it held my gaze and kept me looking at it for quite a while. This one made the cut because there were many pictures of people, photographs of people in this show that didn't make the cut. And one of the reasons was, although the portraiture is absolutely lovely, the story elevated this one above. And you can see the story, you feel the joy, you feel the circle of connectedness, these two children obviously liking each other, and you're part of it. And this is good art in any form will bring the viewer in if there's a story that connects you to your humanity and to the imagery itself. And this one definitely does that. The next photograph took me a while. And the reason it did was because I was spending so much visual time enjoying the wind blowing the sand and the soft shadowings and the hard edges that I failed to notice there's a figure up here in the upper left corner until my second pass. Now, when I jury a show, I make a run through of the entire show just to see the scope and breadth of it. Then I will do a second pass through all of the images and I will say, oh, okay, this one catches my eye and holds me. But I don't select these final ones that I did until I get to the third pass. So I'm trying to give you to reassure you that when I look at a show, it is not with any lightness of feeling. I look deeply at every piece. And that's why this one took me a while to catch it. Yet all of this lyrical, horizontal, restful lines with the agitation of the sand held merit by itself. This one made it human. This one gave it scale. So it got in. And this collage got in, or this composite, I'm not quite sure. Here's the downside to doing virtual judging. You don't have the size of the work. You don't have the feel for the power. Imagine if this piece is 6 feet wide by 4 feet tall. Or imagine if it's 3 inches wide by 1.5 inches tall. We just don't have the ability to see the scale of works when it's presented this way. That's the downside. But the upside is we have a chance to really look at the pieces with our zoom features, and we can actually zoom in to see the details. And that's what I did with this artist's work. Again, design matters. We have pattern, we have repetition, we have variety, we have mass, we have line, we have all of those elements working in partnership to create this overall design. There is a story in here, and I hope that you might take some time, if you get to see this show online, to really look deeply into this one. And finally, we have this one, which is, again, trio, focal point, color, joyfulness. It's not a traditional sunflower, which everybody seems to want to photograph, but it's more of a daisy flower, which made it intriguing to me. And yet the beautiful handling of how the exposure is done here with this incredible contrast versus the more subtle contrasts found in these areas. Design, this matters. Design, this lines of the stem and this leaf falling over, it matters. This photographer composed this image in such a way that it's not just a pretty picture, it's absolutely an elegant design. So it, of course, made the cut. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you today and how a juror's mind works, what happens when you enter a juried show. Photographing your art is a whole nother topic. Maybe I can do a video about that, and how presenting your work to the criteria of the show entrance rules. All of that matters. But in this case, the only idea I wanted to share with you is what goes through the juror's mind as we sit down with a plethora of work from which we have to make choices for awards. Now, the ones that I've shown you, these 15 and these 14 in these 2 videos, all of them are up for award, but not all of them. There aren't enough awards for the entire group. However, it's nice to know if your painting or your sculpture or your artwork was included in these final cut, why they made it to the final cut. And that's the reason I made the video. So thank you very much for watching to this point. Ta!